Dead Art Studios Paint and Chat, and today we're going to discuss my first experience with modern art, which was a piece by Dame Barbara Hepworth. And also we're going to look at my painting that I've been doing and see what's happening with it, because it's getting a bit crazy. So let's start with the painting and I'll talk about my first ever experience with modern art. Right, so the painting is 30 by 40 centimetres on a birch panel, and I've been doing this dropping hair technique on where I've been putting a bit of paint on a palette knife and dropping paint off a strand of human hair onto the birch panel. And what happened was I kind of made a terrifying face. That wasn't really what I wanted, and I was like, well, that's what's coming out. But then I was like, no, it's not what I wanted. So I went a bit mad last night and I put these red streaks across, which I don't know really what they're all about. Maybe they're like, well, I just like red and streaking first and foremost, but then maybe it's a bit like the English flag, maybe it's a cross, or maybe we're channeling Dame Barbara Hepworth herself, and it's just a form, and that's what she was all about, forms in nature, and also things that she saw in nature, like standing stones, history, prehistory, things like that. And that's what motivated her. So maybe it's something like that. And in the background, where the face was, I've kind of banished the face, turned it into a shadow, so it's kind of a past face now. But I think we need to brighten it up. My daughter, she told me, needs more bright colours, Dad. So that's what we're going to go for. I'm going to start with some white paint, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape it on around the edges of the shadow with this knife here, this little blade that's off a scraper tool, and then we're going to discuss my first experience with modern art. Now, look at that, all the paint just comes out the side of this thing. I don't really know why, but there you go. Let's scrape it down there and get it off. Right, now when I was a kid, I grew up in the kind of north of England, North Derbyshire, and it wasn't really a place where you'd expect to see modern art. And I was a very small child when I was introduced to it, because in Chesterfield, the post office at the time opened a big sort of national office for sort of bureaucratic type things, and they commissioned a piece of art called Reclining Form, aka Rosewall, if you want to look it up, by Barbara Hepworth. And she made this, and then they sort of just plonked it in the middle of the sort of modernist style office blocks, and it was on water, which is how it's supposed to be viewed, and it was there just for everyone to see, and we used to walk past it. And I was talking to my mum about it yesterday, and she says I was interested in it even then. I was like, oh, what's all this about? And of course, Chesterfield at that time was probably quite a sort of industrial place and quite a sort of working class place, and probably didn't have a lot of time for Barbara's modernist forms. But I was apparently quite interested in it, so maybe that sowed a seed that's led me to where I am today. And it's certainly nice that I could have been exposed to her work, even though I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. So Barbara Hepworth, she was born in Wakefield, also in the north of England, further north than Chesterfield, 1903. I'm writing my details down on here these days. But she moved to St Ives during the Second World War, I think, with her husband at the time. She got divorced a couple of times, or married a couple of times, but also divorced a couple of times. And she moved down to St Ives. Now, when you have a sort of look around at all the material on her, it always says like she left for St Ives, and that was like the important thing. It doesn't mention a great deal about her life in Wakefield. Now, that must have been quite a difficult life. I think she was she was a daughter of a sort of surveyor, a civil engineer, so they would have been kind of middle class, and she always spoke on the films of her quite Queen's English, like very much like the Queen. So that is definitely not how they would have talked in Wakefield at the time. And I had a friend when I was at university studying my PhD called Dave. He was from Wakefield, and even though I was from quite far north in England, I used to have basically no idea what he was saying. He had a very strong accent from West Yorkshire. Now, so obviously, was it that she rejected it herself, sort of the north of England, and it was definitely St Ives that she stayed there 20 years and did all her art there and had a studio there. It was definitely St Ives that motivated her, but I would be interested to know what sort of part her sort of maybe more industrial upbringing in Wakefield would have been like. And some of her later pieces, when she was working in bronze and stuff, which were massive, did involve things like welding and like, you know, something that's almost on an industrial scale. So it would have been maybe something, maybe a history there played a part in that. Now, most of her earlier sculptures were done in wood, probably because that's what she could get hold of, and she used to paint them and coat them in plaster and things like that, and then put interesting like little like wires almost holding them together. And she was inspired by what she says is nature. Now, this statue Rosewall that I saw, Rosewall is a place in Cornwall, and if you Google image search it, it brings up an outcrop of two rocks sort of separated but then kind of hollow in the middle. And this is a bit what the sort of Rosewall sculpture looks like. At the time when I was a kid, I think we thought it was like it said reclining form, so we kind of thought maybe a woman lying down or something like that, because it was kind of curvaceous and curled, and there was some talk of her doing a piece that was of a pregnant woman, and I think she did, but it wasn't that one. But I think somewhere in my mind I've mixed up the two. So I was interested to see that it's actually a natural sort of stone form, maybe this Rosewall place that she's seen, and it's almost like she's smoothed it all out and created this interesting modernist aesthetic, which really she was one of the true pioneers in. And now she had a contemporary whose name I've forgotten, and he used to do the same kind of thing, but I think she was the one that started it, and it's very timeless, this kind of modernism that she was doing. These shapes and the aesthetic and everything she was doing was sort of pushed forward by her and has kind of sort of endured and lasted. And it is one of those, you know, things that has sort of got a everlasting style to it and hasn't really gone out of style. She did do drawings as well. She had some kind of experience with surgery, so she was drew like surgeons and anaesthesia, and she had kind of interest in space as well, and went to look at some of the like new radio telescopes in Britain and stuff, and some of that stuff inspired her as well, with like glass and things like that. So she was very forward thinking and ahead of her time, and still sort of very relevant today, I would say, in her style, and really quite amazing. I mean, everybody kind of knows who she is, but I do wonder if, you know, because she didn't necessarily like to push her work in America and things like that, and also some of her large sculptures were very difficult to move and a bit fragile, whether sort of she didn't make as much international impact as she could have done. But I think the style and the way it sort of worked into architecture and things like that, she definitely has had a massive impact on it. And the kind of way I think about it is what she seems to have done is she's looked at nature and the things around her. And if you imagine contour lines on like an Ordnance Survey map showing the changes in height of hills and everything, it kind of joins a sort of more pixelated and grainy view of the world into a smoothed out, almost like a view of fields. I mean, like maybe electric or magnetic fields, where you don't necessarily think of a point, but really an area of probability where, like, maybe an electron may lie or something. I'm remembering my A-level chemistry now and the electron shells, and you can't really pinpoint where they are because of their momentum, and then if you try and slow them down to look where they are, etc. That's not for now. It's not a science lesson, but I imagine that almost like that these fields where an area of probability, it's almost like she just took nature and smoothed it out into zones, and it's very pleasing to look at. Now, how are we getting on with the painting here? So I've got a load of white and I'm scraping it over basically everywhere except for the red. Just got a little bit more to do here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to maybe scratch it off a bit with the blade cleaned, and then we're going to put some yellow on. Oh, right, so I've been talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour now, so I'm just going to look at the painting, soothe myself a bit, calm down, have a little think about Barbara Hepworth and what else I might like to say about her. Well, I suppose it relates to me in some ways, because like to go out there as a little kid from the north and see that there, I don't think much of it. It's still there, so one day maybe I'll go on a pilgrimage to find it and see what I think. It's quite amazing that, you know, her art's going to be worth millions and millions of pounds now. No one's ever tried to steal it or graffiti it. So some interesting thoughts there, isn't there? That it sort of managed to just last in a place where you might think somebody might just smash it up. Right, so we've got the paint on it. I've got some paint left over here, and I've got quite a bit of white here as well, but we'll not over white it. I've got a bit of roll to clean my blade. So yeah, she worked in wood, and then later, and she also did marble and stuff, and she learnt carving on a trip to Italy, I think, where she learnt carving with marble and applied that to wood as well, and later on did bronze and stuff, because that let you do bigger things, and she probably had more budget and notoriety. I think that's, I mean, like, I'd love to do gigantic paintings, but I ain't got the space or the sort of funds to do it, so I'm kind of stuck on this size. And in a way, Barbara's sort of early sculptures were sort of manageable, or they'd sit in the landscape as like plinths. She sort of had either like plinths and sort of monument style, or figures that were standing, and then forms that were reclining and curved. And it was very much about what she removed as much as what she kept. But when you look at, like, she had this solid thing, and the way she's removed everything and revealed this negative space, it's really, really interesting to look at, and it does sort of mess with your head a bit. You're like, oh wow, you know, you want to get in there and look at how she's curved it all around and everything like that. It's really quite impressive. Now, I think at my local museum, the Ashmolean, because I'm down near Oxford, I think they've got some there, so maybe I'll go and have a look at what they've got down there, because I think there's at least one Barbara Hepworth there, so that might be worth going to have a look at one day. And yeah, apart from that, the only other one I've seen is the Rosewall one in Chesterfield, which has been, at one point, there was some debate as to, you know, whether, are we going to maintain this thing or sell it or anything. You know, I think somebody wanted to sell it, and then it got put on a sculpture walk in the Chesterfield area, and now it's back kind of in its original home, placed on water, which is what she said it should be placed in. So an interesting piece of history, really. And maybe, you know, I don't know how she was later on in her career, but I'm not sure she would have been necessarily taking commissions for an office building later on. I don't know, maybe she was up for anything, I don't know really. It's actually quite hard to find out a lot of stuff on this now without, like, on the internet, there's just short clips, and you have to kind of piece it together. There's longer sort of like presentations and things, but I might look to see if there's a book as well that we can read about and then discuss that. I did look briefly, and there was like a pictorial autobiography. That might be worth looking at. I'm still reading my Tracy Emin book. I'm about halfway through that. So maybe next week or the week after I'll be able to give my thoughts on that. Now let's have a look at this. We've got the shadow. See, I'm all Barbara Hepworthing statues, and I'd like to have a go at some carving as well. But this is painting chat, not sculpting chat. Probably be quite noisy at hammering away, won't it, as well? Quite noisy now. Right, let's have a look then. Well, it's brighter, so my daughter would be happy. Let's get some yellow on, but maybe not where the shadow form was, just in the surrounding areas. And let's think of forms as we do it. Channel our inner Barbara Hepworth. And see if we can just apply some contours, not get too hung up on the details at the moment. I've got some handsy yellow, so let's do that. I have to say, I feel like I'm struggling with my art at the minute because I don't know what it's saying, and I do want it to say something, but then on the other hand, when I'm doing it, I'm sort of just almost experimenting and learning, and I'm adding one thing and another thing, and it's all getting a little bit sort of out of control. But without doing all those things and kind of learning, I don't know how to refine. So I feel like I'm kind of trapped in the early phases of painting still, or becoming the painter that I want to be. So let's get this yellow on, and that'll be a nice place to finish. And every time I do art, sort of scary, spooky things come out. I don't know if there's a comment on some suppressed trauma or something, but it just seems to be terrifying when it comes out. And I want to kind of move past it, and I want to kind of find beauty and express myself in that way, because I don't feel like I am a particularly dark, and maybe I am moody, but I don't know. I don't feel like I'm a dark. You know, some people who like they stylize themselves around a sort of more gothic vibe, which I do like. Maybe I am like underneath a bit more spooky in style. Who knows? So yeah, something's definitely coming out from the subconscious, but I want to augment it and change it and talk to it and say, right, subconscious, I appreciate what you're saying, but this is not what we're going for right now, because I want people to put it on the wall. And yeah, some people might put spooky stuff on the wall. I'm not disputing that, but on this occasion, it's not really what I was going for in the first instance. So I feel like I need to put my foot down to my brain and say, stop making spooky faces. We're going to try and brighten it up a bit. Now this red thing, I don't know what it is yet, but we'll not worry about that today. I'll put it over there where I stare at my paintings for every time I pass it, and that's an important part of the process for me. And we'll decide what's next. So a lot of my sort of work that I've done on this already has just now vanished into a background, but you can see hints of it, so it does remain, and it has kind of added to the what's happening now. But what's happening now is definitely something that I didn't plan, so we're into new territory. So I did wonder, like Barbara's studio, which you can go and visit as a museum now in St Ives, so that might be a nice trip one day. She had all these beautiful sculptures she's made around and everywhere, sort of positioned, and she'd go around and work on them, and mainly outdoors and stuff. I did wonder if she had the same problems as me and like got a load of sculptures that she just threw away or, you know, abandoned, or was she so well trained, because she was trained in art. I think she went to the Leeds School of Art and then to the Royal Academy, got a scholarship. Back then, things like scholarships existed. I do wonder if we've left that kind of equality behind a bit, and we think we're a more equal society, but actually she did have the opportunity as a female from the north of England to get a scholarship to go and train at is it the Royal Academy of Arts? I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it is. That's where she went. And I think the chances of you getting paid to go and do that now on behalf of some government scheme is approximately 0. So that's an interesting point in history as well. But yeah, did she always execute what she wanted, or did she make a mistake, and just throw random bits of alabaster and and wood away, it would be nice to know, as an artist, calling myself an artist, but as an artist, it is interesting to know if the greats managed to always produce something, or whether they just used to throw things away. I do know that Francis Bacon used to like destroy his canvas and burn them and things, and then people used to like go in bins and try and rescue them and stuff like that. So at least Francis was destroying his artwork in a similar fashion to me. Let's try and get a more defined line here, and then we're going to finish with a last little bit of paint, and then we'll have a look at it. I'll work on it for next time. Might fly into the bin yet, we don't know, in which case I'll be starting a new painting, or maybe this one will be back. I'm going to try and reintroduce some of the hair technique back into this, because that's kind of where we started, isn't it? But then we just ended up making a sort of terrifying face. Not really what I wanted to do. There we go. Some little bubbles on that. We'll smooth that off when it's dry. Dead Art Studios, paint and chat. Have a look at Barbara Hepworth. Google Rose Wall. Have a look at that statue that I saw when I was a little kid. See what you think of it. See you later.